number of virus cases in Russia has been soaring this month.
The death toll remains significantly lower than in other countries.
Sunday, the Russian crisis response
Russia enacted a law enforcing tough fines for those deemed to be spreading fake news.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post, working from home. The media stories we're looking at this week will take us from Moscow to Minsk via Manila. We examine Russia's fake news problem with COVID-19. The official numbers just don't add up. Belarus's state of denial on the coronavirus, and the bloggers out to change the narrative. Freedom of the press in the Philippines hits a new low with the conviction of Rappler's Maria Ressa, and the subtle ways in which so-called non-racists let racism thrive. It's food for thought.
No thanks.
Russia is currently in third place on the list of countries with the most confirmed coronavirus cases. The official figure there exceeds 500,000. But that is in dispute, as is the country's fatality rate, which last month was 7 times below the global average. According to journalists and scientists who have studied the way Russia tabulates cases, those rates should be significantly higher. Truth is a casualty of the coronavirus war, and the Kremlin itself is trying to get a grip on a glut of conspiracy theories and fake news about COVID-19 that gets shared online and then seeps into mainstream reporting. On the 1st of April, the government equipped itself for the job. President Vladimir Putin hastily signed off on legal changes that enable the authorities to go after those they accuse of spreading fake news, which, when you examine some of the sketchy COVID-related data being produced by the Russian government, is a little rich. Our starting point this week is Moscow. On patrol with Russia's misinformation police. Their job, getting those accused of breaking the new fake news law to sign confessions.
С моих слов записано верно. С моих слов записано верно.
The woman who posted about a COVID-19 death in a region where officials report there are no cases.
Вину свою признаю, раскаиваюсь, простите меня, пожалуйста.
The man who shared a story of a friend who was fined for not wearing a mask in public.
В связи с распространением коронавируса. Но я потом в группе ВКонтакте поделился.
The faces are blurred, but the message is clear. Deal in fake news, and you will be fined or jailed under the terms of the new law. And once those confessions are signed, the videos end up online on the Interior Ministry's own YouTube channel.
This law was fully drafted at phenomenal speed and signed off by the president in less than a week. It's a monstrosity. Why are they passing these laws? And will they be applied to disinformation only about coronavirus or other matters too? There is an astonishing, almost unbelievable number of cases brought against bloggers and social media users who have shared accurate or even legitimate information.
Since April of this year, we have been running Project Pandemic Big Brother Online to monitor all of the restrictions on citizens' rights using modern digital technologies. New criminal cases appear every 2 days, more than 200 cases since last year for distribution of fake information online. And the greatest increase has occurred since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic.
Most fake news prosecutions in Russia target ordinary citizens, sharing information over social media accounts, and more journalists have been affected. Reporters questioned over articles on shortages of medical supplies. Established newspapers like Novaya Gazeta, even this Moscow-based medical platform, either questioned under the law or forced to delete articles the authorities say could cause public harm. Meanwhile, a pro-Kremlin voice is free to go on a state-funded television channel and spout conspiracy theories blaming Americans for the pandemic, and the authorities don't do a thing. Someone like Nikita Mikhalkov.
Do you have 3 days to talk about him? Nikita Mikhalkov is a celebrity in the Russian Federation, having his own media shows on state-funding television channels. He is close to Russian political, economic, financial, cultural elites. He talked about the role of US corporations and the way they're connected to COVID, which clearly was a case of a conspiracy theory.
А вот миллиардер, филантроп Билл Гейтс, основатель Microsoft, который занялся фармакологией. Зачем? Ну, давайте посмотрим.
That program, like many other ones, was not based on research, but rather on this echo of voices that we hear again and again on social media. Just another fantastic example to show how there is confusion about what ethical journalism is about and what actually truthful reporting really means.
This show aired these claims and ultimately it was taken down in response to public outcry, although it's still available on YouTube. And we can kind of see this as selective application of media legislation. Now, in post-Soviet Russia, there's quite a substantial tradition, I guess, of engaging with conspiracy theories in ways that really help to shore up political power for the regime. And this would include particularly talking about the threat, certainly from the West, and also in terms of informational activities from the West that are somehow geared to destabilize Russian society. So in this regard, it's actually not that surprising that a conspiracy theory about Bill Gates and COVID-19 would appear on a Russian state-funded network.
The Russian law is very selective, and if there are some famous Kremlin bloggers or journalists from the federal channels, they will be never been prosecuted. And when it comes about just local activists or journalists from the opposite media, they face these problems with administrative and criminal prosecution against them.
The biggest source of COVID-19 misinformation in Russia may in fact be Russia, the way it compiles its statistics. Health officials like to boast that the country's coronavirus fatality rate is 7 times lower than the global average. Journalists call those numbers a cause for investigation, not celebration. Methodology is key here, and Russia's has been dubious. If a patient succumbs to a pre-existing condition, then that is listed as the cause of death, even if their passing is precipitated by the virus. There are some other telling numbers the state simply cannot explain. The deaths above average figures for both Moscow and St. Petersburg, month-to-month comparisons against previous years, have shot up significantly in the midst of a pandemic, yet the authorities insist the virus is not the cause. Some Western media outlets have examined the official Russian story and picked it apart. Pro-Kremlin media have derided their work as politically motivated.
Да я рад, что Нью-Йорк Таймс написал это, потому что как только Нью-Йорк Таймс начинает писать, что что-то плохо, значит, все довольно неплохо.
But much of the best number-crunching reporting on this story has come from Russians like Lilia Yaparova, working for Meduza, a news site safely based next door in Latvia.
There was a moment in mid-April when journalists started noticing that official state data on fatalities wasn't matching the data from doctors.
В России самая низкая смертность от COVID-19 среди 10 стран с самым большим числом зараженных. Такие данные приводит оперативный штаб.
My research has shown that the federal statistics are constructed in such a way that entire cities have been omitted. At some point, they just stopped adding the number of infected and dead people from certain locations. In one place, 25 fatalities were found but weren't counted. One Moscow government official in charge of medical affairs told me in April that the bureaucracy was Chernobyl-like. He said he was absolutely misinformed simply because his subordinates didn't want him to despair. But eventually, he was forced to face the facts, even though Parliament and the Ministry of Health are trying to conceal the truth.
Anyone studying this pandemic and the 4 countries with the most infections will see a pattern. The leaders of those countries, in different ways and to differing extents, have told their citizens to trust them and not journalists. Where has this manufactured mistrust of the media got them? How many lives has it cost? And all those numbers are just the official cases and the official casualties. the ones they're admitting to.
What we can see through the pandemic is a kind of after effect of it, is that all the problems that those countries had become more visible because of the pandemic. And therefore, we're really looking at the situation of mistrust in Brazil, where people are out in the streets protesting. With the Russian Federation, the kind of ongoing problem is mistrust in the data that is being released by the officials. And fake news is something that has been boiling up there for some time now, kind of a natural development of those processes.
Across the globe, there have been lots of questions raised about the specific counting mechanisms chosen, so it's not solely a Russian phenomenon. But in reality, the most important thing when dealing with a public health crisis is that you have clear and consistent government messaging that abides by the most up-to-date scientific evidence. The worst public health outcomes are those where there's been unclear or inconsistent government messaging. And now in Russia in particularly, we're seeing that Putin's own personal approval is reducing, and we're also seeing more generally these longer-term trends of declining trust in public institutions and in media.
We're discussing other media stories that are on our radar now with one of our producers, Meenakshi Ravi. Mina, after years of legal hounding by the Filipino government, the journalist Maria Ressa, the editor of the news site Rappler, now faces 6 years in prison. How has it come to this?
Because, Richard, it would seem President Rodrigo Duterte is obsessed with Ressa and Rappler. We've tracked multiple years of verbal abuse, numerous investigations, even the revoking of Rappler's license back in 2018. Ressa herself has called this death by 1,000 cuts. Now she and a former colleague of hers have been convicted of cyber libel for an article published back in 2012. But here's the kicker. The cybercrime law under which this libel has been identified did not even exist when the article was first published. It was enacted 4 months after publication.
But Rappler then updated that article, and that created a technicality that prosecutors jumped on, correct?
Yes, but the update consisted of correcting a spelling mistake. These are dark days for the Filipino media, Richard. Just last month, we reported on ABS-CBN, the country's biggest TV network, being taken off the air. And now Maria Ressa's sentencing is a really grim development.
Another story that you've been following, those border clashes between Chinese and Indian troops in the Himalayas. How has that story been covered on both sides of that border?
Scuffles in the contested areas of the Sino-Indian border do break out from time to time, Richard. But rarely do they get this violent. At least 20 Indian soldiers were killed in a battle with Chinese troops in an area called the Galwan Valley. Now, the reason we even know of these Indian casualty figures is because the Indian government eventually made these details public. On the Chinese side, information is really sparse, and it would seem that they are significantly underplaying the story. For instance, soon after the incident, the state broadcaster CCTV ran a brief military statement. There have been some tweets, for example, this one from the editor of the nationalist Global Times. But domestically, at least, Chinese media seem to have buried the story. In India, coverage has been characteristically on a spectrum. On one side, you have newspapers and respected online outlets probing the story and the government's spin. Then you have print editorials like this one from the Times of India pushing for an eye for an eye, in effect. On most TV channels, there has been a lot of jingoism and some misreporting. In this bulletin, for instance, 2 primetime anchors on the Times Now channel simply read out a forwarded WhatsApp message, supposedly listing out the names of 30 Chinese soldiers killed by the Indian army. It was a fake. There are 2 nuclear-armed powers here, Richard. Both of them are regional heavyweights. And this is a story we will be watching carefully.
Okay, thanks, Mina. What do you do if you're from Belarus and want to learn about the viral pandemic to protect yourself? You have a president, Alexander Lukashenko, who long refused to accept the existence of COVID-19, let alone the idea that it was killing people. Saying things to reporters like, "There are no viruses here. Did you see any flying around?" Your mainstream news outlets are of no use to you. The president brought them to heel long ago, and they're telling people to get on with life as normal. So you go online, YouTube, Telegram, where bloggers are doing the job of journalists. engaging young audiences, giving them the data they need right now, and making President Lukashenko nervous since he has an election coming up. The Listening Post's Johanna Hus now on Belarus's bloggers, the kind of work they do, and the impact they are having in a country where political change has been a long time in coming.
Meet Stepan Svetlov, or as Belarusians know him, Nexta. He is Belarus's most prominent blogger. And he's just 21 years old. His YouTube videos and Telegram posts routinely generate more than 1 million views. Not bad, given the entire population of Belarus is only 9 million.
My Nexta Telegram and YouTube channels are very important for Belarusians as they reveal what is actually happening in the country.
Блогеры, потому что они стараются показать, опять же, то, чего не показывают наши власти.
Belarus is one of the most censored countries in Europe, if not the most censored. Alexander Lukashenko's government is afraid of independent media as they show what is really going on.
Ну, конечно, что популярен, потому что он говорит правду.
I cover crimes committed by officials and civil servants. I try to publish what isn't being printed by the state newspapers or aired by the state broadcasters. We present information that appeals to our younger audience, direct information using simple language that's honest and reasonably objective. People discuss these channels with their friends, and this is how they become so popular. Obviously, the authorities do not like it, but they cannot do anything about it.
Belarus has been ruled by Alexander Lukashenko since 1994. This August, he is running for a 6th term in office. Infamously dubbed Europe's last dictator, Lukashenko does not go easy on his critics. Political opposition is virtually non-existent. Independent journalism was squashed years ago. That's why Nexta currently lives in Poland, beyond the reach of a president known to silence journalists and their sources.
During Lukashenko's 26 years in power, we have only had TV channels that broadcast the official state ideology. Bloggers are thriving as a result.
То, что нельзя заблокировать и запретить. Поток свежей и эксклюзивной информации.
Firstly, because anonymous sources, many of whom are government insiders, state officials, who have information that they cannot discuss publicly, are much more willing to pass information to bloggers than to traditional journalists.
Позже власти решили не рисковать и не усложнять, понимая, что пуля в затылок надежнее. Нет тела, нет дела.
Secondly, bloggers feel more free than traditional journalists because the authorities can't touch YouTube or Telegram channels. They can't block their accounts, and they have no way to stop the flow of information. That's why the authorities consider them so dangerous.
Nexta has become popular because he publishes previously undisclosed information on his YouTube and Telegram channels. This information usually comes from leaks and isn't covered by mainstream media. But there are pros and cons to this. Sometimes false information is sent under the pretense of legitimate news, so you have to be very careful. You can't always trust what these bloggers publish, as the information is not always verified. As citizen reporters, bloggers don't adhere to the same standards or ethics as traditional journalists, regardless of whether there is censorship in the country or not.
Действительно, существует такая проблема, как фейковая информация. Ее могут направлять. Fake news is a problem. Sometimes it is even sent by the authorities themselves in order to discredit our channels. However, we do check all our information thoroughly, using our large network of sources in various institutions and ministries. Thanks to this, the information on our channels, more than 90% of it, is confirmed and verified. Подтверждается, проверяется.
Recently, Nexta has focused on the Belarusian government's handling of COVID-19, and it hasn't come out well.
Несколько медиков уже умерло. Достоверно известно о летальных случаях в Витебске и Борисове. Точное количество погибших Минздрав скрывает.
Belarus currently has more than 55,000 confirmed cases, but only a few hundred officially reported deaths. That's a death rate of about 0.5%, suspiciously low when compared to other countries around the world. Downplaying the risks of the virus, Lukashenko has ignored calls for lockdown measures, suggesting vodka or sauna treatments instead.
Меня? А зачем? Можно, но зачем? Я не понимаю. Здесь нет вирусов никаких.
But as infection rates keep rising, so too does the disgruntlement over the president's approach and the deteriorating economy.
Это реальные новости Беларуси. Здравствуйте. Мы постоянно ездим по стране на автодоме, и поэтому у нас нет собственной студии в каждом из областных городов. Зато мы показываем реальные новости, которых нет в государственных СМИ.
Sergei Tsikhanouski has been crossing the country for his YouTube channel A Country for Life, handing over his mic to ordinary Belarusians.
Почему эта беда пришла в Беларусь? Потому что наш президент не закрыл границы.
With the election coming, Tsikhanouski's videos are attracting viewers on the web and supporters on the streets.
Возможно, надо уже жителям Светлогорска проснуться и проконтролировать, чтобы их голос не украли на этих президентских выборах, как его воруют все последние годы.
People are tired of Lukashenko's regime, so they are joining protest movements. And at the moment, the most vibrant, active movement is around Sergei Tikhanovsky. Most of his subscribers are people who used to be apolitical. Some are even supporters of the current government. But as their feelings of powerlessness have increased, they have started moving to the opposite camp. These bloggers' videos have galvanized people, inspiring political action, which has obviously irritated the authorities and led to various acts of repression.
The main way they're going after Tikhanovsky is through administrative arrests, arresting him, his supporters, and those who appeared on his videos, anyone who expressed their opinions on his YouTube channel. The authorities have come to understand that blogs like Tikhanovsky's Country for Life or Stepan Svetlu's Nexta don't just spread information, but the bloggers themselves are becoming the center of attention. And they can actually influence politics, not just talk about it.
The government's pressure doesn't seem to have deterred Tsikhanouski. If anything, it has invigorated him.
Я, Сергей Тихановский, белорусский предприниматель и блогер, заявляю о своем намерении участвовать в президентской кампании в качестве кандидата в президенты.
In early May, he announced his own bid for the presidency, on, he says, his subscribers' request. It didn't go down well with the authorities. Before he could file his candidacy, he was thrown in jail, and he has been in and out ever since. His repeated arrests have only stoked the fire. His wife, who has no previous political experience, has taken his place on the ballot, and she is quickly rising in the polls.
Lukashenko is very annoyed with the actions of bloggers. We have become opinion leaders, but don't have any ties to the state, so he's trying to silence us in every possible way. People are being fined, arrested, you name it. Lukashenko has called the upcoming election an examination of power. But he has already failed that test on health, culture, sports, not to mention the economy. And now all he has left is the repressive machine, the security forces and the police. He will hold on to his power till the very end, resorting to any means possible to do so. But it is our desire to change the country for the better. This is what gives us strength, energy, and a desire to continue our work.
And finally, all those protests against racial injustice have triggered discussions in real life and online, forcing people to consider things in ways they hadn't before, such as the notion that not being racist is not good enough anymore. Real change means being something different. It means being anti-racist. When you boil the following video down, that's the message. That turning a blind eye, letting racism go unchallenged, simply contributes to the problem. It was that idea that New Zealand's Human Rights Commission wanted to get out there through a clever, subtle campaign that started a few years back, and a video that actually feels more relevant today than when it first went online. We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
Racism needs your help to survive. You may not be in a position to give much to racism, but whatever you feel comfortable giving will make a huge difference. You don't have to be a full-on racist. Just being a tiny bit racist is enough.
Frequently asked questions about racism. But I'm not a real racist. Can I still help?
Of course. Even if you don't come from a racist background, that's okay. Being a bit racist is super easy.
How do I show my support?
You might not want to wear a t-shirt that says how much of a racist you are. No thanks. I'm racist on the inside. But you can laugh at racist comments. It does the same thing.
If I only give a little bit, will it even make a difference?
Not to you, no. But to the people receiving the racism, they'll be getting hundreds of small bits every day, so it will add up. It will be noticed. Remember, the only thing that can keep racism alive and help it grow is feeding it, nurturing it. And that's where you come in. Will you help it flourish?